All right, welcome everybody to the Customer Success Leadership Roundtable. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Coaching, and today we're tackling something every support leader wrestles with. How do you build a team that genuinely cares about customers while taking real ownership of outcomes? This free session is brought to you by Success Coaching, where we've trained over 40,000 customer success professionals worldwide. Today, I'm joined by three support leaders who built these cultures in their own organizations. Let's have them introduce themselves and share a bit about their journey. Alyssa, let's start with you. Tell us about your role at Phantom and how you got into support leadership.
Absolutely. So, hi, my name is Alyssa Medina, based here in Denver, Colorado. I have nearly 15 years of experience in customer-centric roles, both as an individual contributor. I like to say I grew up in customer success, so this event was especially interesting to join. But yeah, I've been a customer success manager. I've done customer implementation and onboarding. I've also built and led teams across scale customer success, customer implementation, and customer experience, including customer support and things like voice of the customer programs. I genuinely have a passion for building excellent customer experiences. I think that people write into support, people talk to your business because they might be frustrated or stuck. And I think that it's so important to empower teams to turn those around into the most delightful experiences possible. And I genuinely love helping teams make that happen and really bottling the magic of what makes their support organization or their CX organization unique, and making sure that that works for the now, but also can scale along with the growth of the business. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. And I
absolutely.
appreciate your time on Friday, on a Friday afternoon, to fit into my travel schedule. As you can see, I'm not in my normal space. I am on vacation, and as I mentioned, but this is such an important topic. I sent wifey down to the pool so I can spend an hour or so with all of you. Next up is Geoff, a two-time returning champion. Geoff, where are you at?
I'm Jeff. I am located in the Sacramento area of California. I'm currently working for Calendly, been there for a few years, but I spent the greater part of the last decade building and scaling support teams for small business to business SaaS companies. I love fixing problems, solving issues, and making the customer experience the most optimal and efficient thing it can be. And I have really just leaned into technology and how that can really support customers in the best way possible. So excited to be here, Andrew. Thanks for the invite back, and I'm excited to talk about our topic today.
Awesome. Thanks, Geoff. I appreciate you making the time and also again on Friday. And last but not least, a grizzled veteran to this webinar series, Miranda. Miranda, how many times have you joined us now? It's been at
I was
least a half dozen, right? Maybe
I was
more?
gonna say it's way more than that now at this point. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I've known you for probably over a decade, right?
It's been at least a decade.
Yeah, so hello everyone. Miranda Dziekonski. I am the Chief Customer Officer at FEXA. I have been in customer facing operations now either as an individual contributor or a leader since I was 19. So I think we're
So
on,
10 years.
yes, 10 years. And I have a 24-year-old son, so we do the math. Um, but for a very long time. And I started out early years ago in a call center, and then kind of maneuvered my way through. In most organizations, I own customer success, professional services, onboarding, implementation, tech support, customer support, and anything in between, and also HR. So I bring a very interesting perspective because I have had ownership of HR, people operations, and various other functions outside of the customer facing world. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Always amazing to see you, Miranda. I'm sorry we missed each other or you weren't able to get out to Pulse, but we'll see each other soon in person, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Now that you know our panelists, let me set the stage for our discussion. We all know that customer support is the heart of the customer experience. When someone has a problem, they're not just looking for a solution, they're looking for someone who understands their frustration and will take ownership of making things right. That's why building a culture of empathy and accountability isn't just a nice to have, it's essential for any support team that wants to drive real business results. When your team members feel empowered to truly connect with customers while taking full ownership of outcomes, magic happens. Customer satisfaction increases, employee engagement soars, and your support team transforms from a cost center into a competitive advantage. So let's start with the foundation. Why do you believe empathy and accountability must work together rather than treating them as separate leadership priorities?
Okay, so I'm going to take one, theoretically, I agree they should work together, but I'm going to go from just a more practical standpoint. And I think it does depend on organization to organization how you define empathy and what accountability looks like. But I will say sometimes they have to be taken into, you have to split them apart sometimes. And how I've seen this play out, quite frankly, is if you have, well, let me see, I'm losing my words here, which is really like shocking probably for
That
any.
is incredibly shocking.
Um, but how I've seen this play out in specifically in customer support organizations is, there are times when you can't give a customer what they want, or quite frankly, I hate to say this, sometimes what they need in order to get them in a better spot. So I like to sometimes separate those two things. It doesn't mean that you have to be a jerk when you're not able to provide them what they need, but that accountability sometimes is to the organization and not to the customer. So I tend to think of them a little differently.
Yeah, I like to tell people that my role sits at the intersection of doing right by our people, so our employees, doing right for our business, and doing right by our customers. And the best possible decisions I can make and the folks on my team can make kind of sit in the middle of that triad. Sometimes a decision has to go in one direction or another, and that's where I think we can empower our teams with context that maybe they don't have. Fill in the blanks on the why. I think from where we sit as leaders, some of those whys are a lot clearer, maybe because of our experience, we've seen it before, maybe because we're privy to just internal conversations that they're simply not. But I think in those cases, empowering with context can help give that frontline team the confidence that they need to like feel that they are positioning the yes or the no, or we can do this or we can't do this through the right lens. And yeah, like that's just such a critical concept across my team and many support teams.
Yeah, I actually like to add a little bit to this because I think one element, especially support instances, because they're dealing with frontline folks, they're engaging with the customers, and it gets, really intimate in those interactions. And I think a lot of times it's easy for support members who care a lot, have a lot of empathy, to forget that we're in a business. And so there's an element of reminding people we are a for-profit business. We must make money. And like, if you don't keep that in the back of your mind, I think it's pretty easy to be like, well, this policy doesn't make sense or this action doesn't make sense for the customer. And so um, getting agents kind of seeing the full business picture has been very helpful for helping to drive positive outcomes and empowering them to make good decisions.
Jeff,
And
you
I
hit the
think that's
nail on the head.
yeah,
Oh,
I was going to say I think it's the key here is communication, right? Is communicating with your people. I've been in situations where senior executives didn't want to share some of those details, and for I don't know, for fear of it getting out. I don't know why, but it doesn't. I mean, if you want to empower people, you want them to be empathetic, you want them to be accountable. You got to explain to them to help. I mean, you're hiring these people and you're paying them good salaries, right? If you're hiring them into your organization, then you should trust them with the information, right? Help them understand here's why we can't or can't do this.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a concept that I like to lean into, which I've labeled as like your scope of influence or like your sphere of understanding. Essentially, I like to visualize it as concentric circles where you and your core role are in the middle, and every layer outside of that is the next level that you can influence. So once you are confident in your core role, the boundaries and guardrails within your particular like duties, then you can think about how do I impact those around me? How do I impact my wider department? How do I impact the wider company? And thinking about things through that lens has really helped me contextualize certain decisions and understand why someone's view might be narrow to where they are right now, especially those more junior folks on the team. So I can say like, hey, you're thinking here. Let me help you think here and then here and here as they get more seasoned in the role and as their understanding of Geoff, to your point, like the business mechanics behind these decisions really influences what they experience in the core of those concentric circles.
Now, there still seems to be, and I experienced this, firsthand in my recent. If you've saw my LinkedIn post about my refrigerator that was broken for 23 days and I couldn't get repaired through my home warranty repair center. There's it almost seems like it continues to be this kind of robotic trying to let's just get through the tickets, right?
Yeah.
So what kind of are there any, did you ever find yourself in that situation? And when you either inherited or you built a support team, and also part of that is communicating effectively with the team and helping them understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, what they can and can't do. But what's the first concrete step that you took or would take to shift from this culture of getting through tickets? Once again, this is top of mind for me
Yeah.
because it just recently happened, to one of owning outcomes, right? Because
Yeah.
that's really what we want to do. We want people to own the outcomes and think about this from a customer's perspective.
Yeah, so I have owned customer support teams that have, started answering 10 tickets a day, and when I left, they were doing 4,000 a day, 5,000 a day. And one of the things that I measured was how often a ticket was reopened. So how many touches were needed to resolution. Did I have, an idea of approximately how many tickets per rep I was expecting? Yes, but it was a range. And I also would track macro and micro level contact reasons and time to resolution by contact reason, which would then give me a better understanding too if somebody is handling something that historically takes 8 to 10 minutes per ticket versus handling something that takes 2 minutes per ticket, of what I could expect. Do team members have, like guidelines of approximately how many tickets a day they should be able to handle? Yes. Would I, march someone out in front of the team and say, you are not meeting your quota? No. For me, it was more about ticket, like how many times did they have to come back to get the answer? And also the customer satisfaction scores by rep would also tell us, how the reps are doing. And also, I created an auditing program on top of that, just to make sure everybody had like their own scores and they knew, are you not only answering the current question, but are you anticipating future needs? What are you doing to anticipate those future needs and help see around corners? And people would get extra points if they were anticipating needs appropriately and helping teach the customers how to fish instead of just feeding them the fish.
I like that. Teach them how to
Yeah.
fish. Geoff, Alyssa, you got anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's really important to develop a good quality program or quality assurance program for your reps. I think that's how you really show and highlight the outcome-driven behavior that you're looking for. If you drive really, really hard into KPIs, which they're super important and you must be tracking them and talking about them and setting goals and pushing performance there. But if you're not showcasing the conversations that are not eliciting the behavior that you want, then you're never going to get to the true outcomes that you desire. I think that's one big piece. And the second big piece for me is finding ways to empower agents to make their own decisions when they're coming across complex scenarios. So anything I can do to give agents the training and the understanding, the tooling and processes that will make it so they can, in that face of that customer, just make the decision if it's a policy question or if it's like somewhere in between, I'm going to fight to empower them. And that gives them kind of the energy to be like, I know that I can take it and I can own this issue and really like drive it to completion. And again, as Miranda said, so that they're not reopening tickets. And I do think that's a great place to look at if you want to find hot points in your organization to fix. Go look at the tickets that keep coming back open. You'll either find agents that aren't doing the thing they're supposed to do, or you'll find topics that maybe need more pre-information or more information at the time that they're getting addressed.
Yeah, you identify, product issues, training issues, help center content that's missing. Usually tickets reopen for one, I would say yes, potential training issues with your rep, but mostly it's deficiencies within either the onboarding, training, or product.
Or product, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and agents love that. Like they want to be efficient and effective. They want to feel like they can come into a conversation and get from A to B and not have to stop anywhere in between. I guess A to C and not have to stop at a B, right? They want to get through that whole process. And any time that they're like, I know that I have the tools and backing of my leadership to make a decision, they're just going to feel better overall with their jobs. They'll be happier and they will just be empowered to make sure the customer is truly taken care of.
Yeah. I my mind is spinning because I love everything that both of you have said. And I think what is really wonderful about the three of us is that we're working at pretty different stage companies. And so all of the things you're saying resonate with me completely. I would also add that just where I'm coming from, going from or like joining a team that was pre-Series A, like us against the world, I've also had to just share a mindset shift across the team, where the volume in our queue is actually the responsibility of leadership, not the individuals. If our volume gets out of control, that is a function of poor planning and foresight on my end and my leads end, honestly, when it comes to staffing and the headcount that I advocate for on my team. So there was that shift of like, don't worry about the number in the queue. Worry about your tickets. Worry about delivering excellent experiences. And we reinforce that by not or by focusing on the core metrics that we know relate to that. So instead of Miranda, to your point, focusing on like how many conversations did you make it through this week or this day, we focus on how many replies did you send this week? Because not every ticket's created equal. One ticket could be a one response reply, one can be like 10 back and forth. In that case, we should probably get on a call anyway. But at the end of the week, has everyone demonstrated the same amount of effort toward the queue? And I think that's what helps them see the connection to the outcome. And then we also incentivized like second plus reply time. So first reply time is excellent, but it's when you have that ongoing thread that if you focus too much on first reply time, it can start to feel like a black hole when you need that second, third, fourth response. So that's the number that we actually tie to our team performance. And we've seen pretty great results because of it. And we've seen our second plus reply time go down from, I want to say it was like 10 to 12 hours to sub 2 hours. And there's still work to be done there, but I'm very proud of that outcome after kind of reframing and refocusing the team on what really matters, at least to us.
So that was the first time any one of you said incentive. And I just, it probably goes without saying, but I think for all the leaders out there, I think one of the things that you need to take a hard look at is, are we incentivizing the right behavior?
Mm-hmm.
Right at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
What
also
does
are,
incentivizing look like, though, Alyssa? When you say incentivize, what do you mean?
in terms of performance, so we know someone's doing well if their response time, not first response time, is within the range that we expect, and their conversations, their replies per week rather, is within the range we would expect. We're also trying something new this month where every 5-star CSAT rating is $5 toward a charity donation. So just, one of the other fun things about working at a startup is you can kind of like throw spaghetti at the wall a bit and see what really drives behavior. So I'm really proud of being able to tie our support outcomes to social good in that context. And I'm hoping that after a successful month this month, I'll be able to make the case that we should do it every month or every other month and just have that kind of be the cherry on top for our team, since CSAT isn't part of their core performance metrics.
I want
I
to
like
call
that.
out, you said, Alyssa, at the very beginning of your thought on this.
Mhm.
the regardless of the size of your organization, if you're a true leader, you're still responsible for that cue. You're planning for what is the future outcome of your business is on you. And if you're not thinking about it that way, then you're thinking about it the wrong way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to that.
Uh, Before we go on to our next question, just a reminder, we will be taking questions from the audience here in about 15 minutes or so. So if you have questions for this esteemed panel of guests, please use that Q&A button to post them um, or upvote something that's already there, because we will go based off of upvotes first. Uh, okay, next question I have for y'all. Um, how do you address the inevitable moment when someone on your team claims to care about customers, but their actions don't align with their words?
It's
Anybody
a,
have that situation?
I mean, I think all of us probably have, right? Um, I think first we have to make it really clear to our team what we expect, what success looks like. Like these are the metrics. This is how we want you to show up. This is the tone that represents the brand. Just make sure it's very clear. The second thing I do is exhaust all efforts on training. Did we train this individual right? Were the expectations clear? Did they acknowledge that these were the expectations? The next, I like to look and see, have they ever exhibited the tone or actions that we want them to, or has it always been below the bar or below the line? If they have, then I try to explore what happened, what changed. If they haven't, then one, it's you retrain and see if you can get them on the right line. But if you can't, this is probably the HR person in me, but it's kind of an up or out type of situation. But you have to exhaust all internal efforts, making sure that you as a leader did everything you could do to set up the appropriate expectations. They have the training, they know what is, needed to be successful, and then explore, is this a change in behavior or a new behavior, and move from there.
I do love your perspective, Miranda, having the like people side of the expertise. Um, I would add to that question is that I didn't say this about the culture, but it was in my mind. Highlighting outcomes and making them really, really visible to the whole team is really important to put people in that perspective of understanding the business. Like, so you take what's actually happening, whether that's your CSAT or your DSAT or your agent CSAT, which I like to have, and then you show the outcome of that. Well, what does it mean when you had this type of conversation? Well, this is what happened to the customer. They churned or, they contracted or whatever actually happened, and making sure you're having that kind of like, this is what happened, here's the impact of this behavior, and here's why it needs to be better. And then plus one to everything that Marina said, you have to set expectations, you have to make sure your training's in order, you have to make sure all these things are well established so that your agent knows what to do and the time is right. I think unless somebody's trying to get out of work, they're trying to do the right thing for the most part. And I do kind of always start with that baseline and then look at my tooling and then look at what the outcome of their behavior was and then try to coach towards it or coach out, which is always an option.
Yeah, kind of getting back to that first question, I think leading with empathy, but using that to drive accountability is really what I'm hearing here is if you lead with curiosity, like what was going on here? What lead me through your thought process? Like ask the question so that you can understand what the actual core issue is here. Is it a lack of motivation? Is it a lack of training? Miranda, to your point, is there something outside of what I'm aware of that might be impacting the ways this person is able to really show up at work? And then also, I think it's important to separate the behavior from the person. Just because you did one thing wrong or said one thing weird, that's not a reflection of your overall character. It's a momentary lapse in judgment. So, how can we give you the tools you need to make a better decision when you're in that same position again? But yeah, like putting on the HR hat too, like you also, as a leader, have to understand when to call it and understand when their motivation, the way they're able to show up, the effort they want to put into getting into a better place, and the outcomes that they are able to drive just don't quite align with what you know your organization needs to be as strong as possible.
Um, Yeah, I love that perspective, Alyssa. But I actually want to go back to something that Geoff said that I think is important. I like that you track agency stat, right? I'm a huge fan of Sir Richard Branson, the founder of Virgin Group, and he famously said, actually, customers are not number one, my people are number one. And if my people are treated well and they're in the right frame of mind and they have the right mindset, that's going to spill down to my customers. So I love that that's a metric that you track. And that's a great segue into my next question for you. Well, what metrics or indicators do you use to measure if your culture change or your culture in general is effective, aside from the obvious CSAT score? So Geoff, you mentioned agent CSAT. What else? What else are you looking at?
Yeah, I also said earlier QA scores. So, we look at QA as more of a coaching metrics, but we're still evaluating it as a percentage of that agent's total quality. And so there's a lot of components to that, but we make it really clear and we even train agents on, hey, this is what we're looking for, and our expectations are this. On top of that, we've recently been looking, and I've actually kind of really liked this. We're looking at positive ARR outcomes. So if we have an interaction with an organization and they expand or they upgrade or they renew, that is positive outlook for the support department to say, hey, look, we had an impact on revenue in this way. And we can see that change a lot close-ish to our CSAT, where it's like, oh, cool. When our CSAT's doing well, we're getting better renewals. So we know that the quality really is impacting the outcomes for the business.
I love that because I mean every touch a customer gets from your organization is playing a part in whether they can continue to do business with you or not. And the people who touch the customer the most are support and success.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think I said this last time, but I say it again. When looking for new agents for support, I love success agents that are like transitionary, where they'll come into a support org because they really do have this business understanding. They understand what it takes for customers to be successful, and they also understand the business impacts of the product and how it goes. And so I love to kind of like merge those people together where I can
But
find.
this is one of the reasons why our new support track is based on the fundamentals of customer success, is because we think everybody needs to understand that perspective, regardless of whether you're sitting in a success role or you're sitting in a support role. And
I
Miranda, I compliment
Oh,
your
I didn't even do
your
that on purpose. This
I
is,
know we didn't even plan this, but
I
yes.
know, I know.
Sure
Um,
you didn't.
Yeah,
no, really didn't. This, if you could tell, this notebook has been well loved.
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, so one of the things I would add, and I don't think a lot of organizations do this, is ticket escalations to engineers or product. There's a lot of talk about building empathy within your support agents and measuring them on CSAT. But the reality is they have control over a very small percent of what actually happens once that ticket is escalated. And they are the representation of the company to the customer. So there has to be some kind of measurement in there around how many tickets are being escalated over to prod eng, how long is it taking for them to get to them, are they being resolved? That whole like communication funnel between those orgs is so mission critical to driving appropriate outcomes. So I want to call that out as a big thing. And also, I'm a big plus one to driving or tying folks to revenue outcomes, whether it's NRR, gross retention, whatever it may be. Really tying every single organization somehow to the revenue outcomes. A good way to do that with support is having a constant pulse on who's coming up for renewal, how many tickets do they have open, what's the most recent CSAT, what are the ticket types, yada, yada, yada. And you build that full, case when you're getting ready for the renewal as a customer success manager by pulling in information from the customer support organization. And if they've had positive CSAT or a positive experience, that's part of the story as well.
Yeah, To add to that, I think it's so important that the teams around you can trust your support organization to deliver on those excellent experiences. So that's one less thing they have to worry about when it comes to a renewal, when it comes to closing a prospect. And like support is a competitive differentiator, like full stop. When I see that our G2 crowd reviews mention a specific support agent or an experience with support, when our CSMs or sales folks get an email unsolicited that's like, hey, I worked with so and so on your support team, they were great. That really helps sell why folks should be proud to work with us, proud to represent Fathom, but also really drives home the importance of that like cross-team trust and collaboration and the opportunity that support represents to be a center of intelligence for the business.
Yeah, I think it's disingenuous for an organization to tie CSAT to agents unless it's an agent-specific CSAT, because CSAT is a representation of how good your product is doing and how that's settling with your customers, not your agent's interaction. So you really have to bifurcate that into two different places if you want to do it genuinely and actually hold people to that information.
In my last role, we differentiate CSAT versus rep-driven CSAT, and rep-driven CSAT was what their like variable comp was based off of. So, not like our particular company isn't quite there yet, but I really believe in that methodology, especially when you're getting product feedback and just general experience feedback as this at the same time as you're getting feedback about the individual experience with the support rep.
Well, and this is the same challenge that people in customer success seats have when we're talking about retention. Okay, that customer didn't necessarily churn because they had a bad experience with a customer success manager. It may have churned because the product didn't do what the product said, or that, sales set a commitment that we couldn't, wrote a check that customer success couldn't catch, right?
Mhm.
And so is that something that the customer success team that's going to reflect poorly on customer success, or is there a caveat? This is something I constantly had to fight with people on. I'm like, hey, this is, customer success is not the everything team. They're not miracle workers. If the product isn't doing what we're pitching the product to do, you can't blame success or support on the customer churning.
Yeah, that's where a really strong CCO comes in handy,
Hmm.
as I raise my hand. Because the reality is at that level, that is my responsibility to make sure I'm really bringing all of my fellow leaders along and linking arms and understanding that the success of the customer is everyone's responsibility, period. And, customers vote with their dollars.
100%. Customer success is a team sport. And that means
Absolutely.
outside of support and success, it's the entire team, right?
Exactly.
Mhm.
So, and just a reminder, folks, we'll get to questions here in about 5 minutes. So put your questions in the Q&A, please. And if you see anything, take a look at the Q&A, and if you see anything that you want answered, that you personally want answered up front, use that upvote button. But one last question I have for you before we turn to the questions, and we touched on this briefly earlier. When you're caught between a team member advocating for a customer and a company policy that says no, how do you manage that without undermining either?
You don't. I mean, let's be real. Somebody's not going to be happy, right? Um,
Right.
but I will bite my lip and hear what Jeff and Alyssa have to say.
I mean, I think we kind of already established the best, from my perspective, the best approach in these scenarios is already having empowered agents, already having good policies that they understand the business need, and then empowering them to make some layer of decision where not everything is black and white. Sometimes there are things that have to be black and white, and that's just the nature of it. You can come in with empathy to the customer and be like, hey, I understand this is a pain, this is a problem, but here's what we can do. Here's the workaround that we can get to. Here's what I can get you to. But at the end of the day, I can't, get you access to your account that you can't verify, right? Or whatever the item is that, is really impactful. And that's really impactful, right? They can't get their account. That's a big deal. But like there's security concerns and all these things. So it's all about having, good established processes, figuring out, what kind of things are going to be happening to your agents and then empowering them when they get to that moment to like really understand and know what to do.
Yeah, I don't think I could have said it any better, but the only thing I would add is like as a leader, knowing when it might be impactful to step in personally, even if I'm not going to say anything different than my rep would have said, just showing that additional investment in like being empathetic toward the user situation, letting them know that that feedback hasn't just gone into a black box, that, who's heard it? Did this rep keep it to themselves? Sometimes just jumping in and reinforcing and just sharing that we understand what they're trying to solve, but also sharing a little bit about why we can't solve it for whatever reason, letting them know the feedback was heard and taken, like we're going to take action on it in XYZ way, can really go a long way, especially when the answer is no.
And I will take a different approach. So if my director over my support team is dealing with this, what they can do to help change my mind about either a policy or, the leeway that is needed, is to gather data for me. So tell me, we get 100 tickets a day and 10 of them hit this policy, and this is the outcome that we're getting because we don't have that flexibility or that freedom, or whatever it may be. But bring me the data, and I will take a look at that data and figure out, is it a big of enough problem for the business and the customer experience that it needs to be addressed or adjusted? Or B, is it so small that, maybe it's a big pain in the butt for the rep that has to deal with it in the moment, but it's not so impactful that it needs to be completely adjusted for everyone, right? And there's probably 50 other scenarios in between. But as, a CCO, if you are a manager or a director or whatever over the support org and you're encountering this again and again and again, get the data together and go tell that story and make a proposal on what you think should happen and what should be changed.
Yeah. Also a fantastic opportunity to coach them on building good business cases if that's something that they haven't quite dipped their feet into just yet.
Definitely.
Yeah, love all that. I think it's you need to be, and this is what I used to do with my teams that work for me, be very explicit about what they can and can't do and where the thresholds are. And if they hit that threshold, it's, because to your point, Miranda, it's not always black and white. So they hit that threshold, come ask a question if you're not sure. Okay. Invite that.
Yeah.
And I love the data and telling a compelling story, but also I think it's really important, and this is a strategy that we teach people, whether you're in success or support, when you have to make a decision, when you have to give a customer the news that they don't want to hear, bring them closer and help them understand, here's how we came to that decision. Don't just say no, right? Say, here's the reasoning behind that.
Yeah, I love that. And I also just want to remind all customer-facing leaders to always put your customer hat on as well. Sometimes we are not the customer of our own solutions enough, and we forget that pain, so we can lose that empathy. Going kind of back to the theme of this webinar. So just don't ever get so far removed that you are sticking to the policy so firmly that you forget the customer experience.
And this was exactly my experience with my home warranty company. And I called them on that. When they escalated it up to a manager, I said, do you have kids? Do you have a house? Do you have a fridge? What if your fridge was out for 20 days and you couldn't feed your family? You couldn't feed,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
they still didn't get it.
I know.
It
I know.
still didn't register. And it was so frustrating. I'm like, oh my God, I'm taking you down the path of empathy and it's not even registering with you,
And
which
you're
is
like,
why I
do you
decided to
know
put them
who
on.
I am? Do you know who I am? I'm going to talk about you
I'm going to talk
publicly.
about you. And you know what? You know what's funny is I finally got a response from somebody senior there, and it was because I filed a claim with the California Insurance Commissioner. And it took to that.
Unfortunate.
And
But that,
it shouldn't have to have gone to that.
Well, so I do want to say I think that a lot of companies on the B2B support side do pretty damn well because there's that, it's business to business,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you have a renewal that is coming and you have to support that renewal. I feel like on B2C, we have so much work to do in so many
horrible.
organizations
Yeah,
where we
totally.
cut shortcuts way too much. Now, B2B2C, that's another story. So,
Yeah, I get it, 100%. And actually, we're working on a customer service track for focused on B2C folks as well, because there is a
much needed.
huge opportunity
Much
there. Yeah,
needed.
for sure.
Can you give it to my internet provider first?
I yeah, internet providers are, yeah, they're a dying breed, so it's not even worth getting business from them. All right, let's take some questions from the audience here. If all of my guests can take a look, I see you already started to take a look at that list. If there's anything on that list that you want to jump in first on, please hit that answer live button. Remember, we don't use typed answers. Our first question comes from Greg. Greg, thank you for joining us today. Greg's question is, what tips do you have to establish operating level agreements, accountability for extended groups like product engineering services, cloud ops to provide timely updates back to support agents? That's a great question. And those lagging responses reflect poorly on support more than they reflect on the entire organization. Looks like Miranda, you want to jump in on this one first. What have you got for for
Yeah.
for him?
Yeah. Hey, Greg. Great question. So it does start with negotiations at the leadership level. Most dev organizations carve out a certain amount of time for innovation, optimization, and then like a tech debt bucket. And this could fall technically, I think, in that tech debt bucket. So first of all, working with your leaders to negotiate and figure out how much of that time is allocated, and then how much will be allocated to your pipe that you're creating. And then having SLAs tied to it. I know it sounds, it may sound like I'm oversimplifying it, but it's essentially a support organization within the organization. It's just they're dealing with you as a customer instead of the customers that the support org is dealing with. It's just an internal customer agreement, right? And until your team can, or your leadership team gets that mentality of you are an internal customer to the devs, then you will probably have a lot of friction until that mindset is adopted. But I would start with that mindset or trying to preach that mindset and then figuring out how much time is carved off. And then you can work the queue and figure out prioritization after that.
Love that. Alyssa, Jeff, anything to add?
One of the first things I did when I got to Fathom last August was work with our head of engineering, now CTO, to revisit our prioritization tiers. So what is a P0, what's a P1, et cetera. What does that look and feel like when something comes in through support that might meet those priority levels? And then what does that mean in terms of a first response if we have to escalate to engineering? We do like our inbox to engineering is on Trello. So I set up automations where if the card is tagged with a certain priority, a certain due date gets applied to it based on our first response SLAs, so that when we audit that bucket each week, we can see what's overdue, what's waiting, maybe where we need more information from the customer. But at least establishing a baseline has been helpful. And that also helped us create a business case for hiring our first support engineers. We realized that there's enough meat on the bone that if someone just focuses on quality of life improvements, customer love, and just more complex scripting and tooling for our tech support team and our general support team, that means that our software engineers can, work on the big, meaty, exciting things, and they can work on like the things that make a true difference to our support queue and to our end users in the context of running into walls, running into bugs, et cetera. Our first support engineers are starting in 2 weeks, one of which is an internal promotion. So TBD on what that's going to look and feel like. But I'm just really excited that by establishing that initial baseline and agreeing on definitions, we were ultimately able to create a strong business case to elevate someone into a new role and to hire for this role externally as well.
Yeah, and I'll plus one to both Alyssa and Miranda. I think specifically it is a mentality, a leadership mentality that has to be forged. If that does not exist, you will not get anywhere and you will be constantly butting heads. If your leaders don't support you on both sides, it's basically the same thing with your agents and your customers. You have to create a table of expectations that have to be followed, and then you have to hold people accountable to it. And I always like to say, visibility is the best disinfectant. Report on it. You have to report on how many escalations, how long is the escalations taking, who's taking more time than others. And we have like a support side bug report that my team generates every month. And we also have weekly cadences where we're meeting with engineering managers to review all our high priority bugs to make sure that they are being held accountable because they inherently don't want to do the tech debt side. They want to do the fun new innovation stuff, but it is critical to the business success that you're addressing those bugs constantly. So create that relationship, get visibility, and then you should be able to hold people accountable to the appropriate SLAs.
Back in the day when I was working for enterprise software companies, we had a sustaining engineering group. That was a
Mm.
standard part of it. And then SaaS happened and sprints started happening. And I would go into companies, especially in the early days of Success Hacker when we were doing consulting, and I would look at them and say, "So who's dealing with sustaining engineering?" And they'd look at me like deer in headlights. What's that? And it was frightening, right? And this whole concept of sustaining engineering kind of left the collective consciousness, and I was shocked by it. Greg, thanks for the question. Thank you all for the answers. Let's move on to our next question. Justin from LinkedIn. Justin asks, what is one of the most important actions that you found builds empathy for teams? And it looks like Miranda wants to jump in on this one as well first.
And just to be clear, great question, Justin. When I said I would take it, there were like loads of other ones in between. I wasn't planning on going back to back.
It's
I don't
all
want
right,
anybody to
Miranda.
think I'm being greedy
Nobody's
with the
accusing
question.
you of hogging the conversation. Don't worry.
I've been very quiet today. I'm proud of myself. So Justin, great question. I touched upon it already a little bit, but your customer support teams should be customers. They should be using your product on a regular basis. And I know it's a little bit harder, especially if you're in B2B in a very custom environment, but you have to set up some kind of environment and have like regular training or regular accountability that they're in there using it so they're walking in the shoes of your customers. Now, if you are an organization that has budget, I would highly suggest getting your support reps on site with your customers if you can, once a year or whatever cadence you can, and have them shadow and observe your customers using your product. I've done that at multiple organizations, and it is amazing when they get to know the people on the other side of those tickets and see what they're doing with your product. Not only does it drive empathy, it drives pride that you're solving real problems for real humans. And you're impacting that and you're touching those tickets and helping those folks with those problems, right? That's my biggest suggestion. One, be a customer. Two, if you can, shadow a customer.
And in lieu of actually going on site, I'd also recommend, do a all hands meeting and invite a customer to.
I used to do that at Hello
Yes.
Sign.
Yeah,
We would set up, we had a customer, we'd do like a fireside chat lunch and learn and bring
exactly.
in an engineer who just had to implement the API. And I tell you, the questions we would get were off the charts. And this was, of course, pre-COVID, but we also did video chat with
Yeah.
our customers that were further away. Before doing video chat with customers was cool. So I love that
Jeff,
answer.
Jeff, Alyssa, anything to add?
I have a bit of a different angle on this, but still
Please.
relevant. So, because our team is still small but mighty, something that I've really tried to instill in the team is you all are at the company at such a unique time where every decision you help make, every decision you influence helps impact the foundation of how we're going to do support now and in the future. It's this really just empowering talk track, I feel, that helps everyone feel super connected to the outcomes of our department and hopefully to our business as well. But we did a support only offsite back in February. And one of the exercises we did was coming up with our team core values. And instead of me saying, here's what I observe, what do you guys think? I had everyone break out into, I want to say, three groups, come up with their version of core values, present it back to the team with examples of why they think those are our values. And then I took all of their observations, put them into AI, and had AI spit out the top values that came out of that. So it was kind of this like group exercise collaborative thing, but now we have a list of 8 core values as well as a team motto, which we use as our North Star to help guide what good looks like. Our values are being collaborative, resourceful, independent, empathetic, authentic, accountable, and adaptive. And all of those things are something that folks can reference and really embody, but also feel genuinely connected to because they created it. So that's where I see my position as a leader as more like guiding the ship versus steering the ship in some cases, and making sure everyone just feels that their voice is heard when it comes to what good looks like within our department.
Now, do you have those core values spelling some sort of acronym yet? Have you gotten that far?
Fortunately, no. I am a big fan of acronyms, but there's, you know, Kriya Kapi does not roll off the tongue. But the last thing I want to share is the motto that we came up with because I think it really ties everything together so well, which is support with heart, solve with skill. Together we thrive by delivering excellence, empathy, and human connection in every interaction. Like tearjerker. But this really is the heart of what we do, and I know. So when we talk about empathy and accountability, like that is all something that we've just verbally agreed is important to us and is really like part of the DNA of how we
Love that.
operate.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say a brief thing on this. I think if you want to breed some inter-company or inter-organizational empathy, have leaders do ride along with your support team. Have every new leader go spend a couple hours at least with a support agent just watching stuff come in. They don't have to say anything, but they need to physically be there so they can feel the tension. And that is a great way to really get them connected, regardless of where they end up in the organization. It will give them a lot of insight into like the depth of your customer experience and why their little piece of the puzzle is going to be impactful.
We actually, at one company, I actually had the other executives spend half a day on the support lines.
Yes.
And I paired them up with a support person. I said, "Hey, this support person is going to be sitting next to you, but you're going to be the one interacting with the customers." And they took calls as well as chats. That was impactful. And it was during a particularly challenging time in the product development journey. So
Yeah. When I was a customer success manager many, many years ago, I always made time to do live chats. It was more often when I was newer to the company, but the support team was always happy for the help. It helped me build my product knowledge, but also just helped me understand the customers that much better so that I could apply that to my book of business. So, very strong advocate for, I mean, live chat can be very scary, but I think it's getting over that fear that really helps you like feel like you know what you're doing, build that confidence, especially when you're newer to an organization.
well, it also gives you exposure to the product. And then it gives you exposure if you're going to be in a customer success role to the warts, to the
Mhm.
problems. We actually had a client where we uh, uh, recommended that all new customer success managers spent their first 90 days as a support agent.
Mhm.
I
I
was
love
at a
it.
company where everyone had to spend time as a support rep. So, and I loved it. It was a little scary with some folks, I won't lie. But
Maybe audit those responses before they hit send.
Awesome. All right, Justin, thanks for the question. Our next question comes from Morgan. When would or should a call be warranted rather than constantly have a reopened ticket. Geoff, it looks like you want to jump in on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. There are going to be a lot of factors associated to when you can or cannot make a call, and that's going to be based on your business needs. Like, can you invest that 20 minutes on a phone call? Maybe, maybe not. I tend to lean into make that call earlier and sooner because that is typically going to give you the quickest outcome if it is going to be an issue that is kind of reiterated. Frequently, you'll need to kind of create some criteria based on type, subject, things like of that nature to ring it in so it's not happening all the time. We've recently been leaning into better tooling that helps with that. So we have a quick screen sharing program that works directly in our product. So if we're chatting with a customer, we could just be like, bam, I'm in your screen. Here's where to go do this. And it has helped us avoid a lot of the phone call side of that and just given us a lot quicker outcome. So look at a technology solution that can help you there. But do it early and often. It will give you better customer outcomes for sure.
I'm
It's
always
a
telling my team if we go instead of going back and forth, with this chat, text, email culture, pick up the
Mhm.
damn phone. And when I say pick up the phone, not necessarily a phone, but get on a Zoom with them, right? Hey, instead of going back and forth, get on a Zoom with them, have them show you what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Same thing like what you were saying, Geoff. And it was something that I actually saw PandaDoc we're Doc subscriber. They're really good about that. When I would be chatting with somebody and be saying, "Hey, here's what I'm trying to do," they're like, "Okay, let's hop on a screen share, and once you show me what's going on." It wasn't actually a Zoom call. I wasn't speaking with the person, but we were at least chatting with each other, and I was showing them what was going on.
Yeah, here's the thing I will say. I won't name companies, but at one company I went in and I noticed that our cost per contact was through the roof. We had a mix of free users, B2C and B2B. So we had customers that were paying us $9.99 a month free, and then we had business customers that were paying us tens of thousands of dollars a month. And the phone number was out there, and the folks that were using it the most were the folks that were not paying us. So I went and I depublished our phone number, took it down. And what I learned a lot. One, I set up guidelines for my team of who gets a phone number, who doesn't, when do we call, when do we don't. And I was very, very strict about measuring cost per contact. Not that that was the end all be all, but there does come a time where you have to look at how much it is costing to support your customers. And the reality is a phone call is more expensive. Is it worth it sometimes? Almost always, especially on the B2B side. If you have a customer that is spending tens of thousands of dollars a month getting on a Zoom or getting on a phone call is almost always worth it. I usually provide my team members, though, with a little bit of a guidance. If the customer is mid-market or enterprise, you're going back and forth more than 2 or 3 times, get on the phone. If they are SMB, long tail, free, whatever it is, provide as many free resources as you can, then escalate it to another team and see if they can resolve it before you spend the time getting on. So usually there's some kind of in between there, but that's how I tend to approach it.
Well, that's just the reality of the situation. While we want to treat our customers with the same level of respect, we're not going to treat all of our customers the same way. I'm not going to treat $1,000 a year customer the same as $100,000 a year customer.
Exactly.
That's just business. Okay, that is
Exactly.
what it is. So
Unless that $1,000 customer has enough white space to become a
to
$100,000
be
customer.
cut, yes,
That's
100%.
where your segmentation comes into your strategy.
Yes, yes, and we always talk about the current value as well as the potential value, right? And that's why in number of cases we did consulting in, we said, okay, you should segment based off of ARR and potential ARR. Because that if we treat them well, that $1,000 a year customer can turn into a $100,000 a year customer. So just need to be aware of it, need to be cognizant of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, related to that, and it actually ties into the next one of the other questions that Jordan wrote about support packages, right? Because we're talking about tiered support and how we would manage that differently. And it's going to come down to what are you trying to incentivize out of your support team and what do you need
Right.
from your customers and where that space lies. At Calendly, we actually treat our trial customers the best because we know that if we talk to them and we give them time and energy, they convert at a rate that is so substantially better than even our sales team that we're like, cool, we're going to spend a lot of energy there. So we'll hop on calls. We'll teach them how to set up their product. Now, part of that's based on how our product is utilized. It's usually you get in, you set it, and you forget it, right? Well,
Yes.
you get in, set it, convert it, and then use it, and you're good for a while. And so we spend a lot of energy in that, but a lot of it's based on what in your product cycle, where those touches are necessary and how much time and energy and money you can put towards different groups of people. And it's the same with our, queue management. I've always set up queue management based on how much people are paying us, what is their potential for growth, and then it's just a list. It's like, this is the people we need to talk to first every time, and it just, goes down from there.
Well, continuing on to Jordan's question, which by the way is how do you tie in support packages into your overall queue management and treat marquee customers that purchase these packages? What different or similar incentives to you do you have for each support tier? How do you approach that, Alyssa and Miranda?
Alyssa, do you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, we currently don't have specific support packages that we sell. We just aim to be excellent across the board, of course.
Mhm.
But I would say that the customer's investment and potential becomes more relevant the further someone gets into the support process. And what I mean by that is we want to answer an enterprise customer's frontline question or usability question just as fast as a free user, because our philosophy as a business is that our free users are basically advertising our product to people who might want to give us money themselves. So that's kind of how we justify having a free product. And so if we can give the users the tools they need to tell all of their friends, like, hey, this is amazing. I don't pay them any money, but I got really fast support on my question about XYZ. That's fantastic advertising for the business and ultimately influences the revenue. But once things get to a point where it's with tech support, something we have to escalate to engineering, that's where we're going to put the more critical hat on and say, okay, does their spend warrant an engineering investment in fixing this XY thing? Is this a company we want to invest in or like an integration we want to invest in from a business perspective? And that's where like the leadership point of view gets a little bit more involved and where just with tenure and experience, you get more of that gut feel for what falls into which category, what's kind of in that intersection of how much time it's going to take to fix versus the investment versus the customer's investment. But yeah, just like from a frontline perspective, we just want to be, sub 1 hour first response, sub 2 hour continued response. And that's across the board, at least for now. I mean, I'm also coming from the perspective of like a Series A company that, our user base probably isn't as, you know, tiered as the ones that you two are partnering with.
Yeah, I wish I worked in organizations where I could always do that. That is such a nice place to be. I've as well specialized in that, 5 to 50 million journey. And usually when you're at the 5 million, you're like hugging every customer so tight, whether they're paying you a little bit of money or a lot of money. And then when you get, on the other end of that spectrum, you start looking at your COGS and where the expenses are and how much each customer is costing you to serve. To answer the question about tying in support packages into queue, I'm a big fan of Zendesk, and Zendesk has a lot of great tools that you can go to the account level and plan in or, code in or not code in, but key in the actual SLA that they have purchased. I have numerous times sold different support packages that they vary on, your SLA to the methods of contact. Like if you want phone support, you purchase phone support. If you don't need that phone support, you just want to do email, that's a little bit different. Or if you don't want to pay for anything, then you get the crappier SLA, but you can still get access to support, right? So there are many things you can add to incentivize or add to each support tier. The last thing I will say is If you are somebody in an organization right now thinking about charging for support, make sure you partner with your leadership to understand what their thought process is on revenue that's not subscription. Because every SaaS company looks at this type of revenue a little bit different. I will say I've seen a big shift since the funding from VCs and PE firms has gotten a little bit tighter to where the investors are not as allergic to services type revenue as they used to be. But it's always good to know that it does change the valuation of an organization. The more revenue you take in or dollars you take in that is not associated with subscription. So just make sure if you're somebody who's thinking about charging, that you understand where your leadership is and how your board thinks about it.
Yeah, in my experience, some sales teams like that can be the first thing to get discounted.
Oh,
It's onboarding
absolutely.
piece, support piece. Definitely an uphill battle at those organizations to really get them to believe in the value of charging for those services. And also, I like if a customer is paying for it, they're that much more invested in the value of those services as well. Um, and Geoff, to your point about like identifying key areas where those elevated services could be helpful, that is something I'm currently thinking about. Like, yeah, right now it's, a lot more flexible, but in the future, where are those key points in the customer journey where having an elevated level of support is going to make a meaningful difference? And my initial hypothesis was, maybe in the middle of an agreement or like in the middle of a journey because that's when you kind of are in a steady state and asking yourselves, like, is there more value I can be getting from this now that I have a bunch of data in the system? What I heard from our customer success leader is it's actually onboarding and implementation, where having that more direct contact, that higher touch level of service can make such a meaningful difference, not just for the team implementing it, but in their like advocacy for like land and expand opportunities and, places where we can dazzle them and build their brand perception up front. That'll have returns down the line in terms of like customer lifetime value.
The handoff from sales to post sales and the onboarding phase are the key moments of truth
Mhm.
in your relationship with your customers. So that makes sense. Hey, Geoff, hit the done button for Morgan's question for me, please. Awesome, Jordan and Morgan. Thank you for your questions. Our next question comes from Tony. Tony, thank you for waiting patiently. What is your advice for support cases? Jira's sitting in R&D and support does not update the customer in the case comments. What is your advice besides the CSM keeping escalating the case? Geoff, looks like you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, and we already spent a good amount of time talking about this, so I'll just reiterate, the processes. You need
Yep.
to get leadership buy-in on accountability for escalations. That's number one. If that doesn't exist, you're just going to always be in this state. Number two is you need to make a very specific SLA plan on what you expect from engineering to give you back feedback and then make it visible. Bring it to light, show it in a report at a frequency that leadership will see to make sure people are being held accountable. If you do those three things, you'll get it managed.
Awesome. Alyssa, Miranda, anything to add?
No.
Awesome. All right. All right. Are we going to actually get through all the questions? We just might. All right. Our next question, our second to last question, is from Vivek. Vivek, thanks for joining us. Thanks for the question. Do we have any parameter to measure empathy depicted by a CS agent while interacting with a customer? And the way we have sentiment analysis via AI tools, empathy analysis is also available or possible. This is important when you are dealing with a very high customer query volume. Alyssa, you have something to say on this?
Yeah, this dream is currently a reality. Um, like companies are building QA tools that use AI to cover 100% of your support interactions and can evaluate for empathy and even go as far as evaluate for if additional empathy was required in that situation and not rate as part of the QA analysis on empathy if it was not something that required it. Um, I have looked into a couple of these tools, and I'm sure there's way more out there. We use Front as our support system, and they just launched Auto QA in like directly in Front. And empathy is one of the primary scorecards that it uses to evaluate conversations. So Vivek, you might want to look into what's already within your support platform. But then I've seen other tools like the Loops doing the same things where you can use AI to cover 100% of your ticket volume in terms of QA, and build scorecards that are specific to empathy, tone, like the good practices you would expect and require among your support interactions.
We just implemented recently HubSpot service the service product. I think it has some elements of this in there as well.
Yeah. It's becoming more table stakes nowadays, just
Yeah,
as AI is getting better. But Vivek, if you weren't aware that this already exists, I'm happy to share that this is kind of the what's happening in the QA space right now.
awesome. And Alyssa, hit the done button there, and we'll get to our final question. I think we have enough time to answer this. David, thanks Vivek for joining us and for the question. David asks, speaking on accountability and empathy, what have you found most difficult in building this bridge and foundation with your teams? We touched on a bunch of these things already, but any final thoughts as we wrap up our webinar? Miranda has some.
I did that to mess with you.
You did that on
Uh,
purpose, didn't you?
yeah, I did. Um, I'll leave one final thought. You have got to get your interview processes down tight. It's all about hiring. I know I touched a lot upon training, but it actually even starts before the training and setting up the right policies, procedures, expectations, all that stuff. You've got to have a solid hiring practice, understand like the right questions to ask to find the humans that'll do this in your organization and the type of environment you play in, and also the customer base that you serve. So I think if you solve that, you will be way further along than solving all of the downstream things because you'll hit it right at the entry point.
Yeah.
Alyssa, Geoff, anything to add?
That's exactly what came to mind for me is people need to come in with a solid foundation of that intrinsic motivation to provide an empathetic experience. It's a soft skill that is tough to train if people don't start from that place. One of the things I ask in my initial screen with candidates for our support roles is, what would you say are the top three qualities of an excellent customer support representative? And then they share what they think they are. And then my follow-up is, can you tell me can you tell me about a time where you had to draw upon those qualities to navigate a challenging customer situation? Inevitably, one of those things usually revolves around empathy. So I can use that to get an initial gut check of how they can, how good they are at reading between the lines and like putting the customer first while also considering the impact to the business. Um, Geoff, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I'm plus one on everything. I don't even really think I have too much to add.
Awesome. All
Mark
right.
done.
Yeah, I
And
think.
I will add, it is by not by mistake that I have, I could go around the corner, probably five of these now. Um, I have used success coaching, which was coined success hackers back in the day. I don't know, at four companies now, three, four
Something like
companies.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. To bring in and do just that foundational training for my team. So I would also say getting a good training program, and partnering with Andrew Marks is also super helpful. And this is not an infomercial, I promise. I'm just wanting everybody to know that that is available too. And I've personally used it at multiple companies. And I am a tough critic. So for me to bring in someone again and again, or a tool again and again, that is a really big vote of confidence. So
That's high praise.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Miranda. I appreciate that.
Of course, of
All right,
course.
that's our time for today. What a valuable conversation. The real measure of success isn't what I think, but it's what you take away from this. So please share your thoughts on LinkedIn and tag our guests or success coaching or success hacker. Thank you to Alyssa, Geoff, and Maranda for sharing your hard-won insights and practical strategies with our community. Here's what I know about great CS leaders. They don't have all the answers, but they know where to find them. That's exactly why we created this roundtable, to tap into our collective wisdom and lift everyone up. Join us next month on July 17th when we'll dive into managing remote customer success teams effectively. Until then, make space for yourself and your mindset every day. Have a great rest of your week and month, and I'll see you next time.